IVM.
There's a quick survey to fill out on ivmpodcast.com/survey. It lets us know a little bit more about who's listening to us. And you know what? We're going to do a few prizes. So, we'll do a random drawing of maybe 10 people and we'll send you all some swag. Remember, that's ivmpodcast.com/survey where you can fill out the survey.
There are moments when entrepreneurs have that aha moment, when they truly understand that this is something they really want to not just do, but build and really work towards in the next many years to come. And it's always lovely to understand not just that story, but really how the story of that entrepreneur and that venture progresses from that point onwards. One such story is the story of YogaBar. And today I have the co-founder, Suhasini Sampath, on Advertising is Dead, not just talk about the ecosystem within which YogaBar exists and how they've been adding more and more categories as they've gone along, to truly understand how a brand that started as a conversation between two sisters has actually been built by them and has scaled to where it's at right now. I'm Varun Duggirala. This Advertising is Dead. Right back with Suhasini.
Working Monday to Friday glued to your chair making you feel dull? Worry not. Get your 5-minute weekly dose of travel around the world with postcards from nowhere. Join me every Thursday as I explore the strange, obscure, and fascinating parts of the world and bring out facets of travel you may not have thought of before. You can find us on the IVM Podcast app, website, or wherever you get your podcast from.
Welcome back to Advertising is Dead. Welcome to the show. We're doing this.
Lovely to be here, Varun. Very nice to talk to you.
I must tell you, I think there was a period of time, and it still happens very often, when the breakfast bar was my go-to, especially when you had to rush to office. In those days, I remember that my bag would always have one of your breakfast bars there. All the berry kinds, the non-chocolate kinds are always there. So I'm going to be talking to you both as a consumer and as a person from the business end of things. So you're going to have a dual hat set of questions coming at you. But welcome to the show.
No, very happy to be here. And we make what we do for consumers like you. So very happy to even get insights. It's just really useful. So please check out our most recent dessert bars. We'll also end your meal. Like you start with breakfast and you end with dessert. So Perfect. Check that out too.
I'm going to check that out for sure.
Yeah.
I want to start off by asking you, why the name YogaBar? Let's start with that. I think oftentimes you're going to figure, where does that name really come from? And we'll take it from there.
There's a nice story to that. We actually trademarked the name YogaBar 3 years before starting the company. So Anindita, who's my sister, she was living in the US. She was with the M&A team at EY, and I was at LBS and I was exchanging at Wharton. And I used to live with her in New York, and both of us used to go to the Bikram yoga class at the Flatiron building.
Okay.
And when we came out of the class, we used to always go to Trader Joe's and pick up a bar. And bars was huge. They were all billion-dollar companies in the US.
Yeah.
And Anindita very casually mentioned one day when she was eating a bar, in India, we don't have healthy snacks. If I ever set up a company, I would call it YogaBar. And I said, listen, whether you do the company or not, I'm trademarking this name. At some point, I'll make money, selling this trademark. And we got the trademark. And then, of course, I came back to India and, Anindita and we continued to chat. And then she had all these recipes and I would work with, a lot of bakers in the city. Like I worked with 100-odd bakers in the city to perfect the perfect bar, right? I used to stand outside the yoga studios in Bangalore and sample out the bars. And literally, people used to call me back and say, listen, can we have the next fill? And can we have the next fill? So my mom and me used to spend all our weekends just, packaging these bars and selling it out in yoga studios. And, funnily, and then it just took root. And, I met Kaval once and he said, I'll give you 10 lakhs, no questions asked, try to build this company. I called Anindita back and that's really how we all started. And why YogaBar? Because, you know the story now. It came out, just outside the yoga class.
Outside yoga. I find it interesting that kind of were almost getting your hands dirty, creating it, then, kind of going out there. At which point did this turn into a business? I mean, obviously the check came in, but how do you look at it then? I mean, till then, was it almost like, okay, I'm doing this because I enjoy doing it? Because when that call happens, I think it's almost a shift, right? Till then it was just you doing it. And at that point, that shift happens. What was that period like for you?
So Varun, I think entrepreneurship is tough. It's like if people don't talk about it enough, it's really difficult to take that call, right? And inherently, given Anindita's and me and my background, we are ambitious people. We are inherently people who want to excel at everything that we do. We first decided we wanted to be entrepreneurs, but we also needed to figure out an area which we were really passionate about, right? And this is my personal belief, right? The only three things that matter in life is roti, kapda, makan, and roti right on top of everything else. Like if you are disrupting or innovating in something, there's nothing more beautiful than innovating in food. And in a lot of ways, it's so primal to our existence, right? Like to make the food industry a bit better is, and we thought about it at a time when retailers used to tell us, India mein health kahan dikta hai, tasty dikta hai, aap kya kar rahe ho, itna pad ke, like, what are you all doing? With all these degrees, you should go and be working at a, fancy ass job. And we said, let's pick something difficult and also let's try to do, it right. So we are talking about literally 2012 when we started formulating this and bringing it all together. So I think it's first the passion to disrupt something that we believe needs to be disrupted. And second of all, the ambition of creating a really large enterprise. If you're in entrepreneurship, because of the sacrifices involved, you might as well create something really large. And today, as we stand as the largest health food company, we believe we've sort of come somewhere on that journey. So, yeah, I think, that is really where it is for us as a story.
What did you kind of, the initial years, you also learn, you walk in, think this is what the consumer is going to be like.
Yeah.
This is what people will want, because this is what I inherently believe. And I think all founders start with the problem, like you said, like there was this whole fact that it doesn't exist in India. Yeah. That's the problem we saw, and you kind of walked into it. But what did you quickly realize when you looked at the consumer? So, okay, maybe this is something different. Maybe there's some things we were right about, or some things we didn't really get.
I think it's understanding the Indian consumer who's different from consumers globally, right? Indians, when it comes in, food is religion in India. That's different from everywhere else in the world. Like if you give people reason to believe, but you're militant about food, they're not going to accept you. You have to work with somebody to meet that halfway point, of taste bhi bana hai. You have to make health and you have to make it affordable.
Yeah.
So if you want to create a really large company, it's taste and health and affordability, and give people a reason to talk to each other about you. You create that brand love, like you create conversations around what you do. And you realize that the Indian consumer, if you can crack it, like today, I feel like if I was in the US, I can definitely create a very large brand because I've understood the Indian consumer, who's the most difficult.
Yeah.
In the pyramid of consumers, an Indian consumer is the most difficult to please.
Yeah.
And I think understanding this and concept, right? You need to crack taste and health and affordability. Although I'm summarizing the problem statement very, very quickly, is you come to that answer, after a few years of doing what you do.
And I think also, like you mentioned, the space itself hadn't really evolved, right? You didn't really have, was there even, what was technically, I don't even know if the term is healthy snack, healthy food, because food is supposed to be good for you. But how do you look at this category as it stands right now? Just from like across the journey and today, where does it stand right now?
I think health food is still a very, very small segment of the total food market in the country, right? But I think people are becoming increasingly aware. People are reading nutrition labels a lot more. I think people still won't compromise on taste. You can't make a healthy product. You can't package broccoli and expect to create a brand out of it. That's not happening with the Indian consumer, right? Like,
unless you're my daughter who only likes broccoli, weirdly enough, but nevertheless.
You're super lucky, Varun.
That's the only thing she likes. So it's a problem.
Oh, okay. It is... I think where health food stands is when you look at, the Britannias of the world, when you look at how ITC selling biscuits, etc., we've only scratched the surface. But I do believe, looking at the kind of journey that we've seen in the West, health food companies took 20 years to create noise, to witness hockey stick growth. YogaBar has made some headway in that journey. By the time the sector grows really big, of course, someone who created the category in India will probably benefit most, but we've only scratched the surface. To give context, we are now a 200 crore brand trending a bit on 250 crore, which is tiny compared to the 30,000 crore food market that we're talking about. So, I think people have adapted to natural personal care much, much faster than they've adapted to natural food. So, I mean, contextually.
Which says a lot about the consumer as well, right? Is that we chose the visual appeal over the healthy part. But I feel what's also interesting is that, and just how the categories evolved, and suddenly you're seeing that it's not just one overall category. There are so many, like, you now razor focused on two kinds of consumers beyond the broader consumer. And you obviously have stuff focused on kids, you have stuff focused on women as well. Was that almost a natural growth point? Or is it when some categories of ours are growing well, which are across all all age groups, all genders, but these are specific for this, almost like, is it under tapped? Is that why you went towards this, or how did that happen?
I think thought process, Varun, clearly is what are the categories we can really make radically different, right? And YogaBar as a brand has always said that, listen, if you're cooking food at home and you're making home cooked food, don't touch packaged food. All packaged food is only second to like home cooked food. But if there's packaged food out there and it's a fairly large category, trust us to do the best job of giving you the best offering on taste, affordability, and health. Leave us to do it. Like, we will pick categories like whether it's noodles or biscuits or chocolates or and children's cereal. Why we picked very, very early on is because the children's cereal out there are just filled with maida and sugar. And we've spent 3 years of R&D coming up with excluding whole grain and dal and saying, listen, we can create a product that your kids will not know the difference between chocos and yochos, but you have big reason to pick up. So what are the categories that are ripe for disruption in packaged food? How can YogaBar use their innovation to make the product significantly better and give the consumer reason to believe? I think that's really where it is.
I think that also brings me to an interesting point, right? Is that one is to see the opportunity, but also is to make sure that you have existing categories which you've gone deep into also kind of work, right? And I think, I'm asking this also because as companies scale, there is that point when you realize that, okay, once again, we're going to be expanding into more and more things. In your journey, how did you see that part? Like, how do you look at that part? How do you make sure that it's in some ways what we started off with, the essence of what we started, how do we kind of maintain that while spreading across categories?
Yeah, I think so, Varun. Like, I'll give you an analogy, right? Like, I can't launch juices because I have to add preservatives to like a mango juice. So YogaBar won't get into it because at the center of everything that we do is the consumer to whom we have made a promise that we will make, we'll use certain kind of ingredients. They will always be wholesome ingredients that we can feed our families, right? And if we believe that we can't justify that promise to the consumer, we won't enter that category. So it's not like business. Business comes only as a second outcome of the primary objective of actually making packaged food healthy. So we will only choose segments and sectors where we believe that our innovation can actually result in a much better product to the consumer at the same price that he's actually playing at now. If we believe we can't do justice to that journey or product, we won't launch it. And that's really internally how our DNA works on this whole,
So how do you make chocolate healthy? I have to ask. I've been asked by my producer to ask you this question because she was very intrigued to know this thing, because you do say that. And I'm like, because you generally always told that chocolate in essence is not healthy unless you have, like, some people say dark chocolate, some people give you malt. But how do you do that? Without giving away any secrets, of course.
No. Varun, inherently the chocolates that you eat or get in the market is not really chocolate. It's actually something called compound, which is mostly fat, right? It's flavored with chocolate. What YogaBar does is we primarily use just cocoa, we use dry fruits, we use a bit of whey powder, and we use dates. And that's how we make our chocolates. So we call our products chocolate brownie and, nutty fudge brownie, but we just use it, taking out all the compound, the emulsifiers, the artificial stuff, and just using cocoa and dry fruit and, dates. And that's all we use. So clean labeled ingredients result in better products.
And speaking of that, and that's actually was going to be your next question, right? Is that obviously there are multiple ways in which, especially if you're a new startup, you can work with already existing factories, manufacturers, say, okay, this is what our brand is, kind of work with them, they manufacture it for you, and you kind of slap on your brand basis what it is, and you can put it out there. You chose not to go in that route. And I feel it seems to be an increasing trend, especially in food. Obviously there would be reasons you've had, but have you seen the pros and cons of that? And what would those be?
So the reason Anandita and me did it, because we were the first ones, we were the pioneers of this whole journey, right? And at the point where we set out to start this business, there was nobody manufacturing healthy food in the country. Anandita is an engineer. She's from BITS. So she decided that she's going to design all these machines. And the two of us ended up staying 3 months in some obscure village in Coimbatore to get all of our machines machine line sorted. And being as aggressive as we are from day one, we said we have to be able to scale. So let's automate everything, right? So it's not like we use man-made processes and there are 100 people sitting in our factory and there's, possibility of, contamination, etc. So we run everything through automated plants. Now that we've built it, moving from a 600 square feet to a 60,000 square feet journey is easy because we understand process, we understand machines, we understand how we need to do things. Today, although I would say in retrospect, if I was starting a business today, I would outsource a lot of this stuff because today there are enough food factories where with your processes and your ingredients, you will be able to manufacture healthy foods if you're able to designate quality people. That option was not available to us 10 years ago. But that option is definitely available today. So a lot of our newer products, when we need to re-engineer our newer products, if we believe that somebody's facilities actually help better quality, we are okay to pay that margin and, have better quality products done out of their factories.
What you've also done, interestingly, is that you've kind of almost built a customer base without like a broad, like you've not done like broad advertising content, none of the usual tropes of this. So how have you kind of build a community, how build a customer base without what is supposedly told? And this show is called advertising, is that? So how have you not gone the advertising route and still build a customer base?
Varun, I just want to say, like, maybe it's the beauty of yoga. I don't know the answer. Like, honestly, like I was asking, during my fundraisers, I always tell my investors, like, listen, we've never done a marketing campaign, and Anandita and me are such, we're quite shy. Like we're not somebody who really likes coming in front of anything, right? And nobody knows about us, nobody talks about us. So we don't do PR, we've not done a single advertising campaign till date. Like that's the honest truth. I don't know the answer. Maybe customers just really like our products and packaging. And in a lot of ways, I think this year or closer to the end of this year, we will run a large scale marketing campaign. We will go the TV route and we'll see how much larger we can build this with that. But I don't know the secret sauce. It's probably the beauty of yoga. That's all I can say.
So then I'm going to have a follow up on this one. What have you kind of heard from consumers about your brand that's helped you across your journey then? Because maybe there's an answer there somewhere.
Yeah, I think we listen to our consumers very, very closely, right? Like even with respect to like following feedback, even I spend 2 hours of every day just reading comments about my product and also getting involved in how my team is reaching out to consumers to understand what they like about the product. We do more of what consumers like and less of what they don't like. And we also do a lot of our product development basis what our consumers are actually telling us. So we run copious amounts of tests, prior to launching a product. Like even today or tomorrow, you'll see on Instagram, a new product launch is going to be sampled out around our existing customer base, and we'll keep improving the product. So really, the product has been at the center of everything. I think we are very, very laser focused on understanding what consumers want in a category. We spend, to give you context, the first 4 years of the company, we only had one energy bar. Like first 4 years, we didn't expand at all. And now that we have that process set, expanding into newer categories, building the pipeline of products, we know that process very, very well. We're not a company that likes to fail in the launches that we have. We take market share in every single launch that we do because we very, very clearly understand what are the problem statements in a particular category. So maybe that's our marketing strat. I don't know. Maybe talking to consumers, doing what consumers love, building solid product is what we do really well.
I think that the answer lies in exactly what you just said, is that if you actually listen to consumers and they're seeing that level of involvement, I feel what also kind of happens, especially with brands like yours, and I feel that's the interesting part to kind of talk about as well, is that as you evolve and your customers evolve with you, you also kind of build teams and the teams kind of have to also tap into the same kind of philosophy you started with. So how did you approach that? Because as entrepreneurs, you learn how to build teams while you're building teams. So in that sense, how did you go about that? How do you find people? How have you been able to kind of build that team? And what was your thought process through that?
I think so, Varun. I think we are an organization that really, our core values are actually working really hard and putting the customer at the center of everything. Now, people who marry that philosophy survive in a system like ours. People who don't, we find other, opportunities or roles within the organization where it's not that customer focused, but the customer is really at the center of the culture and everything else that we do, right? Team building is like often the hardest part of the whole entrepreneurship journey because the more you can give away, the more time you have to do, other things. And I think now that we are about 300 people, I think, as culture building is probably the right answer there. I don't think we've got it 100% right, but I think we are getting there. I think getting more and more structured into, like, we fill roles for certain things that we need to do. But as we've grown this large, now we will have to make investments into how we want the future to look. Like you rightly pointed out, we really don't do any marketing or brand building, and that's something that we need to focus on. So that's something we will have to invest in today for us to reap the benefits as an organization 5 years later. So that's something that we, is also the hardest part of, building an organization, is getting the right people, right set of people to build this with you.
I have a bunch more questions, but I know we need to go for a break. So I'm going to quickly take a break and be right back with Advertising is Dead.
जिस तरीके से हमारे माँ बाप ने अपने करियर की सीढ़ियां चढ़ी थी, वैसे आज के जमाने में तो पॉसिबल है ही नहीं गुरु, क्योंकि हमारा जमाना इतना कॉम्प्लिकेटेड है। आज क्या नहीं है, कंपटीशन है, सोशल मीडिया है, इतना इंफॉर्मेशन ओवरलोड है कि करियर का टेंशन ज्यादा होता है, उस पर काम कम। टेंशन लेने से कोई फायदा तो है नहीं। क्या करते हैं, ठंडे दिमाग से सुनते हैं प्रोबेशन से प्रमोशन तक पॉडकास्ट को हर सोमवार, जहाँ पे सिर्फ प्रैक्टिकल बातें होती हैं आपके करियर की। और कौन करता है वो? मैं आपका होस्ट अभिनव त्रिवेदी। ये पॉडकास्ट आप सुन सकते हैं IVM पॉडकास्ट की वेबसाइट, ऐप या फिर किसी भी अन्य पॉडकास्ट स्ट्रीमिंग प्लेटफॉर्म पर।
Welcome back to Advertising is Dead. We're still talking to Suhasini. I have to ask you this, and this I think is the question I want to ask every entrepreneur. What have you learned about yourself as an entrepreneur across your journey? Because you learn so much about yourself as an individual, but also as an entrepreneur. I'd love to know both.
Oh, it's a tough one. I think at the end of the day, learning that you still have to prioritize your happiness and the things that you do, and the only energy you derive out of doing this journey is if things still make you happy. And while that's a very simplistic statement, it defines your motivation level. So keeping that in check and assessing that at various points in the journey are really important, because they kind of define the things that you want to change about what really bothers you. I'm pretty manic about that. For me, happiness as a personal life metric is really important. And I don't like telling stories where I say that I've made personal sacrifices and this is what this has resulted in. I don't like those stories. I feel they're dishonest to the life that I want to live. So for me, that assessment, and that comes at some stages in the business. I can't make that assessment on year one when things are really hard, but I constantly make that assessment, and that's the only way to keep balance. I don't know if I've given you a very confusing answer, but
you actually given me a great answer. I think that's important, right? Is that, and this is you're almost preaching to the choir, because for me, the fact that people say you need to work 24/7, you need to hustle hard, sacrifice life. I'm like, no, I mean, the problem is that oftentimes you talk about hustling. We honestly take the wrong things out of the hustle. Hustle is to be able to do jugaad, to be able to get things together, and not about not sleeping or not finding happiness. So I'm fully in agreement, and I'm happy that this is something that you said, because it's something which I don't hear. I feel that we don't hear enough of.
I'll add one more sentence to that. I think it's also very important to keep your personal relationships really happy. And what I mean by that is the relationship with your parents, siblings, spouse, children, all of that. Because for me, as I've assessed in this journey, the times when you can do the most are when you have not stressed the system. And the system that matters most to you is the support system right around you. And I think enough entrepreneurs don't talk about it, because a lot of us have, our personal lives, very, very crazy because we don't sit back and assess. And personally, the only learning I've had in the whole process is that support system around you should define a lot of things even for your business. Maybe sometimes you need to slow down, and that's okay, because somebody at home needs that support, and it's totally okay to do that. And I'm somebody who's a huge advocate of people prioritizing personal happiness, because the objective of life is to make sure you maximize happiness. And it's very important to remember that.
You give me a great way to segue into one question I've been meaning to ask, is that you spoke about personal relationships. Your co-founder is your sister.
Yeah.
How has that been? How has it been to have basically two sisters, like your brand, like it says on your site, it's made with love by two sisters. How has your relationship as individuals with each other kind of evolved, and how have you kind of looked at your roles in building the business?
Yeah. So I think I'll give you. I'll have to answer that question. Also talking about the house that I come from, right? So my dad is super feminist, and we three girls actually, and the eldest one actually invested money into the business. She gave us the money to start.
Okay.
She also went to Kellogg, and she's now she heads ops in a listed company. So very, very ambitious as well. So as a culture, I think my dad's never spoken about marriage at home, but he would definitely talk about education. So as a culture, we've always bred that culture of, trying to do better, trying to be the best version of ourselves. I think doing business with family has its pros and cons, and that's the honest answer. I don't think it impacts the relationship because over a period of time, your family will always be your family. Now, Aditya helps me with everything. Like my husband's literally, my online head quit the company 2 years ago, and our online has gone like a hockey stick. And all of that is Aditya's work. And it's a lot of stress at home because you're always talking work, right?
Yeah.
But working together enables you to understand certain personality traits of the person you're working with. And there is a sense of tension with work always because you're a venture funded company, etc. But I think in the long term, those relationships are much stronger. And I believe that my relationship with my sister or husband have definitely become stronger for this business, for having done business with them than not. Could it have been more, peaceful? If you don't have conflicting situations, all relationships are very smooth. But conflicting situations build strength in the long term. So your relationships are stronger for it. But you have to have that sense of balance even in your personal relationships. If they are relationships that you have to deal with even at work. That's.
No, I mean, I totally relate. My wife is the CEO of our agency. I built my agency. I founded it with my best friends. So totally get it. And personal and professional relationships coming together in that sense. Speaking of professional relationships, what do you look for when you hire someone? Obviously, you spoke about the fundamentals of how you built a team. But if I was someone today who's like, okay, I want to join YogaBar, what do you kind of look for at the stage you're at today? Obviously, the fundamentals of the person, but also like what kind of skill sets have you realized you're adding in more and more as you go along?
I think depth into that particular role that we are hiring for, right? And previous experience plays a lot of, we like people who know their subject in depth. So that's something. From a personality perspective, honesty is right out there. We don't mind people telling us upfront, whatever it is that's on their mind. But as a culture, we encourage people to have honest conversations. And people who, are willing to work really hard because as a culture, in a startup organization, because you're going up against such large companies, it is a difficult journey. And while you get rewarded for that journey is often, involves, a lot of hard work. It's not, you sometimes have to set your own process. You have to do a lot of things that at that particular level you're not used to doing, and you have to come with that open mind. I think that's really what we look for. Like if somebody tells us, no, this job is too junior for me, like first 2 years I would spend so much time at a Xerox shop, and I'm okay to do that. And you need people with that, ability to say that I will do anything. And also one very important thing is for people to treat everyone equally. We as an organization, utmost respect. Like you may like or dislike somebody, but you always treat people respectfully, no matter where they are on that, hierarchy in the organization. So that's really important to us.
How has the pandemic shifted your business? Has it shifted the way you look at your business? Have you kind of evolved it? Because obviously you would have had to go through a period where from retail focus as much on D2C, etc. How has that changed how you look at your business mix?
Yeah, so we were primarily an offline business. So we had 80% of our revenues coming from offline and 20% online. Today, we have close to 70% of our business coming online. And even D2C is now a very large part of that mix. And of course, our future projections, 5 years down the line, we will be 70% offline and 30% online. But the pandemic unlocked the potential of online in some sense. So we never knew we could, do that kind of sales online. So I would say that marked the characteristic. All of our launches now happen only online. We don't do launches offline. We study the market and all of that. And I think that learning has come due to the pandemic.
I think that's a great point, right? Just like it's a great way to study the audience and then scale to offline. But often when people consume and buy stuff off online, you also discover some things about, okay, I didn't realize that this is how they would buy. Have you gotten some deeper insights in the consumer because of going more online in recent times?
Yeah, I think all of our product iterations, once we launch, basically we thought like, I'll give you an example. The dessert bars, for instance, we realized through the pandemic that the snacking occasion where people want guilt-free snacking is actually in desserts. And that knowledge came to us because we started talking to our consumers a lot more. I mean, although we were the default brand for bars, we didn't even know the consumption occasions until we really dug deep in online. So that's sort of like an example. Because the more you talk to your consumers, you start understanding that, listen, there are certain consumption occasions that you're not even addressing despite being a category leader. So I think that's probably a good example. So yeah, that's a learning that came to us.
And when we look at the broader space, as you work towards the future, like I said, like so you're looking towards being 70-30, are you seeing any trends in your space as you go ahead saying, okay, this is definitely stuff which we're focusing on because this is where the market seems to be moving, where the consumer seems to be moving?
I think we've definitely identified segments that we can absolutely disrupt. And one of that is my own, journey through motherhood. I've never fed my kid, Cerelac. I've just used recipes using ragi and oats and things like that. And I was shocked to see that, that segment, there's only one player.
Yeah.
And of course, it's very scientifically well researched and all that. And we are not a company we say all food is sacred. For us, all food is sacred, right? But it is definitely, there is a new age mom who kind of doesn't want to feed their kids, certain kind of products. And we want to create these segments where we can absolutely disrupt. So those segments have now opened up to us because we believe that through online, you can educate. Because say, for instance, an infant food segment, you can't really market it because the laws in the country don't allow you to market infant food at all. And how do you go up against, that you do? So, but online allows you to do that. So you can talk a bit about the ingredients, etc. So that's something that we're seeing as a very big opportunity.
Towards the later part of the show, I have a segment, but I have one last question before we go to that. I want to ask you saying, where do you want to see YogaBar as a company if you look? I never asked for 5-year plans, but I'm saying, where do you visualize this eventually? What do you visualize it eventually becoming?
So, Varun, when Anandita and me started, right, we said when somebody walks into a retail store, they would see a YogaBar shelf and they would turn around and say, all of this packaged food, I have a healthier alternative here in this aisle. But putting numbers to it, I think we're roughly about 250 crores now. I think we'll be about 1,000 crores in 4 years' time. We thought that we'll get to that number in 5 years' time, but we think that we will get to it much sooner because our growth rates over the past quarter have been it's been phenomenal. So and if we sustain these kind of growth rates and the kind of traction we are receiving in the segments that we are entering into, we believe we are already the largest health food company, but we believe we'll be taking market share from a lot of the larger FMCG companies. So that's where we see ourselves.
I think that deserves a dessert bar for sure. That part. So yeah, like I mentioned, there's a last segment of the show which has nothing to do with what we spoke about. It's about you and for our listeners to kind of learn things about you beyond the work part of it. What do you spend a lot of time doing beyond work that keeps you occupied, keeps you focused, and like what do you do when you take a pause or take a break and what's your areas of focus?
So between you and me, and
everybody listening, which is like a lot of people, but
yeah, I used to actually be very good at theater. So I used to be like one of those NI Playfest Best Actress, all of those things. And I love watching movies. I watch movies across languages, and I have this habit of watching all movies without sound because I really want to see if I can understand something by just what the actor is doing. So I would spend a large part of my free time during the week just goes in catching up with Turkish movies, Iranian movies, South American movies and all of that. And I spend a lot of time just, watching because it also gives me a great understanding of different cultures. Like for me, that's the gateway. I feel movies are a gateway to a different culture. And I find that fascinating. Like I could talk a lot about it, but the short answer, I spend a lot of time watching non-mainstream movies. I do that a lot.
Is that what you would have wanted to be if you didn't start YogaBar? What was the goal in life before this happened?
I think media companies can be very powerful. I think that journey in India of people having powerful dialogues and having I can go on a rant about what I think about Bollywood movies and where the power that they have and what they actually end up achieving. But I think media company could be very interesting. I think there's a lot of potential to develop companies that do really powerful dialogues. A lot of people in the West have managed to create, companies like that. I would be very interested in doing something like that. I might do it in my next stint.
That sounds like an exciting one. And I agree with you. There's a lack of media with depth, and my media with depth doesn't have to just be serious stuff. I think there is so much more you can kind of. I think we will immediately go towards that statement and think it has to be non-mainstream, but actually that's the most mainstream part. If there is depth, it connects to everybody.
Yeah, and India is such a beautiful, rich culture. Like the kind of dialogues we need to have, the things we need to talk about. I feel we don't even scratch the surface. Like, and because I spend such a crazy part of my I watch a movie almost every day. Like I watch a movie every night, right? So the kind of dialogues that we need to have in India about different things in our social system, but that's conversation. That's a very long conversation. So, but yeah,
anything that you've read, watched, or listened to recently that you'd recommend?
I think there was this movie called The Lost Daughter. I think it was very powerful in the sense it allows you to pause and think through what you do wrong in relationships that matter most to you. I think that was pretty powerful. I think it was on Netflix. And that's the thing that I remember because I watched it last week. There was another movie.
Too many movies.
Too many movies.
What can you put together in an instant?
What can I put together in an instant? Food? Do you mean food?
It's the most open-ended question ever. It's been asked to almost all guests on the show so far. It's a totally open-ended. You can pick anything you want in the world.
I could write a poem about a window. I don't know.
Weirdly enough, I think someone said poetry a while back, but I haven't gotten a specific poem like this one. I think only once was poetry, and we've got like 170 plus now in terms of episodes. So that's a new one. And I want to close off by asking you, why do you think this journey that you're on, actually, no, I'm going to reword. This last question has been a bit googly lately because I've always asked something will not die. And as my producer will tell you that I have off late been kind of working around how to kind of make this a little more interesting to kind of close up. But what I want to ask you is, why do you think our search for healthier alternatives of what we eat, why do you think that will not die?
Because as society evolves, we constantly upgrade. It's the inherent nature of the way societies are built and way we as human beings structure the way we live. And I think the only problem statement to a lot of health issues is eating better. It's just as simple as that. I think the only way to solve for better health is eating better. And that's really the bottom line. And the search for constantly trying to improve your health is mankind's strongest pursuit. It's the only way to extend your lifespan. And as you see in developed societies, the first indication of a more developed society is the fact that their average lifespan is much higher. And they achieve that by eating better. So that's right.
Thank you so much for doing this. It's been fabulous to have you on the show. It's been an intriguing conversation. I will definitely at some point maybe have a longer conversation with you on the media one. I think there is definitely a much longer, maybe non-recorded conversation there. But thank you so much for coming on Advertising is Dead.
Thanks, Varun. Thank you. Lovely.
Thank you.
Bye.
If you like this podcast and you want to listen to more podcasts like this, head over to the IVM Podcast website or app or wherever you get your podcast from and look at all the podcasts that IVM makes. There's some really fun stuff there.
Hey everybody, it's been another great week on the IVM Podcast Network. On Storytellers and Storytellers, Vineet speaks with drum prodigy Darshan Doshi about helping young Indian drummers take to the world stage. The Simplified Gang delves into the unfortunate financial crisis in Sri Lanka. On Smarter with Sid, Siddharth observes how Lata Mangeshkar was snubbed I tell you, out of memoriam mentions in both the Grammys and the Oscars. This is an absolute disgrace. And on the Life Manifestos, Arena explains how to beat procrastination and show up for yourself. Do follow us on social media. We're IVM Podcasts on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And remember, if you enjoyed this show or any of our other shows for that matter, do please tell a friend. Also, don't forget to rate us on any of the platforms you're listening to us on. You can check us out on YouTube as well. On ivmpodcast.com/YouTube, we have a list of all of our YouTube channels. Do check out if your favorite show is available as full video. We are also doing a small listener survey to better understand how you respond to our shows and advertising on the network. We'd really appreciate it if you could spare a few minutes to fill it out. It helps us build better shows for you. And finally, we'd like to thank our sponsors for this week, SBI Life Insurance, India Water Portal, and Jupiter, a digital banking app. Thank you so much for making this possible.
You're the people pleaser, right? Oh, yes. Or then desperately seeking the one? Oh, wait, you're the one who doesn't think they're ever good enough. Oh. So much drama. And for what? Is it doing you any good? Listen to me. I'm Chetna, your favorite positive action coach. Yes, I'm the one who has been dropping all those truth bombs on every episode. Oh, no. And it's time you learn to say no to drama. That's also what my podcast is called. And a new episode is out every Monday and Wednesday on the IVM Podcast app, website, as well as all major podcasting platforms.